Okay, today we're going to be going through the ACT 1573G from April of 2015. The first question is pretty straightforward. It's order of operations, so you got to do first the multiplication here. 3 times negative 2 is going to be negative 6 plus 4. Then you add those together and you get negative 2, but remember that whole thing is an absolute value, so you're going to end up with B. Number 2, the table below shows the income earned by 5 students from selling tickets for a school fundraiser. Each student earned the same amount for each ticket sold. So all these kids, number of tickets, income. Another student, Francis, also earned that same amount for each ticket sold, for an income earned of $123.25 from selling tickets. How many tickets did Francis sell? Okay, we know that they earn the same amount per ticket, so what we can do is just take any one of these kids. So we'll take this first one, Aida, and we will see how much she made per ticket. So she made $55.25 per ticket by selling 13 tickets. So you do $55.25 per 13 tickets. That lets us know she made $4.25 per ticket. So now that we know it's $4.25, then we can say, well, he earned $123.25. So we take our $123.25 and divide by $4.25, and we get 29 tickets. G. Okay. What is the value of the expression blah blah when x is this and m is this? Okay, so we have the square root of negative 16 divided by negative 1 minus 3. So the first thing we're going to do is take care of our bottom. So that becomes the square root of negative 16 over negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. So negative 16 divided by negative 4 ends up being positive 4. So we have the square root of 4, and we all know the square root of 4 is 2. So that's our answer there. Okay. For all real numbers a, b, and c, the expression ax minus bx plus cx can be written as the product of x and which is the following. So the product means we're timesing x by everything else. So you can see x times what gives us ax? Well, it's just x times a. And then this would be x times negative b. And then this would be x times positive c. So if we had a minus b plus c, and we times the whole thing by x, if we distribute the x out, it would bring us back to that answer, right? ax minus bx plus cx. So then, yeah, that's our answer. A minus b plus c, which is h. Hai has $100 available to buy USB drives with the backup data for his business computers. Each USB drive has a price of $8, and Hai will pay a sales tax of 7%. Now, most people, what they do in this question is they take their $100 and they divide by $8, and they know they can buy 12.5 USBs. But the problem with that is they forgot the sales tax. So instead of costing $8 per USB, we need to find out what each USB will cost with tax. So the best way to do that is take our 8 and times by 1.07. It's 1 for the original $8 and 0.07 for the 7% sales tax. So if we just bought one USB, it would be $8.56, which means every USB, including tax, is going to be $8.56. So we have to take our 100 and divide by 856, and we get 11.68, which means, in reality, we can only buy 11 USB drives. Even though that would round up, you can't go to the store and be like, well, it rounds up. In the real situation, you always have to round down in this case. The lengths of the legs of a right triangle are 4 miles and 5 miles, respectively. So we have our right triangle, we have 4 miles and 5 miles. Now they're trying to tempt you with the 3, 4, 5, which is why F is an option. But 4 and 5 are the legs, so the question is, what's the hypotenuse? So to find that, we have to do Pythagorean theorem. If my thumb can work. So to do 4 squared plus 5 squared, and then to square root that number, and we get approximately 6.4. Okay. Question 7, the best way to do this, honestly, is to guess and check. So least common multiples of 40, 70, 90. Does 70 go, do all of these go into 70? 50 does not go into 70, so no. 50 is not going to go into 210, so no. 50 can't go into 315 because this ends in a 0, so it has to go into something that ends in a 0. Then you go here and you test these numbers out, and you say, does 3150 divide by 50 work? Yeah, so 50 goes into that. 3150 divide by 70. So yes, that works. And 3150 divide by 90. So yes, that works. So the answer is D. There are other ways of doing that one, but honestly, guess and check is usually the way. And ironically, they have the very similar problem like this, and the answers, every time I've seen it, it's always been D. Because they always give you C as the answer choice without the multiples of 10, and A and B are just weird things, I don't know. Okay, Susan makes holiday wreaths for 4 hours every Saturday. It takes 20 minutes to make a small wreath and 30 minutes to make a large wreath. This Saturday, she'll make twice as many large wreaths as small wreaths. How many large wreaths will she make this Saturday? Okay, this is one that people miss a lot. The first thing you have to do is say, since we're dealing with minutes and minutes, we've got to figure out how many minutes 4 hours is, which is pretty simple. It's just 4 times 60, so 240. And that's going to be, that will equal 30 minutes for every large wreath, so 30 times L, plus 20 minutes for every small wreath. Now the other thing that tell us is she'll make twice as many large wreaths as small wreaths. So the temptation here is to put 2L equals S because twice as many large as small. But you kind of have to think about the equation is telling you how these are equal. And you would not, if, you can ask, which one did she make more of? She made more large wreaths. So you're not going to double the number of large wreaths and expect that to equal the number of small wreaths because this we know is the smaller number. So it's actually the other way around. You can think of it as a balance scale. If she's got large wreaths and small wreaths, there's more large wreaths, so to make those equal and balance them out, the number of small wreaths needs to be doubled to equal the number of large wreaths. So that's going to be L equals 2S. Well then, now that we have this equation, we can plug our L in for our L. And so we get 240 equals 30 times 2S plus 20S, which makes this 60S plus 20S, or 80S. So we do 240 divided by 80, and we get, oops, I messed something up there, 240 divided by 80, and we get 3. So we know that our S equals 3. Remember, when you're doing a problem like this, you want to use real variables like L and S. If you just use X and Y, there's a really good chance that you get X equals 3 and then you choose G because it's there. But remember, the question's asking how many large wreaths. And you want to watch out for that, especially in this type of question, because they will often ask the one that's not easy to solve for, but they'll often ask for the one that is easy to solve for. So it really is, you can't count on them asking for the other variable. So you have to double check it every time. So since she made 3 small wreaths, and since we know she'll make twice as many large wreaths as small wreaths, we know her large wreaths are 6. Okay? In ABC below, AD and E and AC, and they're parallel, and if you can determine what's the ratio of the area of this triangle, Well, the problem here, is they haven't given us any numbers. For all we know, we could redraw this triangle with this line up here, or we could redraw this triangle with this line even closer to the bottom. Since they haven't given us any sort of numbers to know where this line fits, it's going to be cannot be determined. On the real number line, J is at -7, and K is at -14. What's the distance? Remember, distances are always positive. And so the answer here is going to be 7. Okay? Since they're 7 apart. You could subtract the 2 and get that. But a lot of people are tempted to choose -7, but distances are always positive. Okay, what's the value of b in the AB solution of the system of equations? Systems of equations just mean you have 2 variables and 2 unknowns and 2 equations, or 2 variables which are 2 unknowns and 2 equations. The easiest way to solve for them in this case is just set a equal to a. Okay, so that means that 3b minus 7 equals b plus 1, right? Because if this equals a and this equals a, then a equals a makes sense. So that's really easy. So then you just go through and you, let's see, subtract b from both sides, so you get 2b. You add 7 to both sides, so equals a. So then b equals, divide both sides by 2, b equals 4. Table below gives the total charge to rent a moving truck from each of the 2 movers. For what number of miles would the total charge for renting Brooke and Ben's be the same as the total charge from Ronnie's? Now, to get the total charge, we need the original charge plus the charge per mile. So we can sit here and we can make equations for these and say, obviously, for Ben, it's just the number of the charge is going to equal the number of miles, period, right? 10 miles, $10, 20 miles, $20. Now for Ronnie, it's going to be a little bit more complicated than that. We realize that as he goes up by 10 miles, he increases by $5. So we know his charge is going to be only half his mileage. Right? Every mile extra he drives, he only charges 50 cents. But what that does mean also is you got to go back to 0 miles. Even if you drove 0 miles, you'd still be charging $40 for Ronnie. So then it's the same as this. We can set the equations equal to each other. We have m equals 1/2 m plus 40. So we subtract the half m and we get 1/2 m equals 40. Times both sides by 2, and we get 80. Another way you could have done pretty straightforward and easy is just kind of take the table down, 60 and 70, 70 and 75, 80 and 80. So, pretty simple. Guess and check there would be fine. Okay. In the figure below, G is the center of the circle LK. No, G is the center of the circle. LK is the diameter, H lies in the circle, J lies outside the circle, LK and M are tangent to the circle. Which of the following angles or minor arcs is the greatest? So a minor arc is the measure from here, from 2 letters along the circle, the shortest distance. Because remember, you could go from here to get to N, but that would be the major arc. The minor arc and the major arc. So for LM, we know our minor arc is that. We can pretty much estimate it's going to be more than 90. But we can also know it's going to be more than 90 because in order for this line to come this way, this line being tangent would have to shoot off in that direction and could never come back and connect. Since J is over to the right, we know that this for sure, no matter how you draw the picture, this has to be to the right of the top of the circle. So that means this has to be more than 90. MK, for that same reasoning, has to be less than 90. JMG, anytime you have a tangent line that touches a line connecting to the center, you're going to have a 90-degree angle. So that's exactly 90, that's more than 90, that's less. LHK, this has to do with the principle that says if you ever have an angle from the center and the same angle that goes to the edge of the circle, or the same end points, but the extra point is over here, this angle is always going to be half of this angle. So therefore, since this we know is 180, we know that this one is 90. So no. MJL, since this is a right angle, this has to be an acute angle, so no. So the answer is A. A bowl has 6 red beads, 8 black beads, and a number of green beads. There are no other beads in the bowl. The probability of randomly choosing a black bead is 1/3. Well, the probability of 1/3 is going to equal the probability of a black bead, which we know is 8 out of the total. So we can cross multiply here and get that the total equals 3 times 8, which is 24. So we know there are 24 total beads. Since we know 6 of those are red and 8 of those are black, we add those together and get 14. So that means the remaining beads, which are green, have to be 10. In the figure below, the border of a pool and the border of the patio are similar rectangles, which means you can set up ratios. Similar means ratio, which means similar fractions, right? The gym dimensions are given in feet. What are the length of the pool in feet? So we're just looking for that. So since they're similar, we can take our question mark of 28 and set that equal to 60 out of 40. Multiply both sides by 28 to get our question mark alone. Type that in our calculator, and we get 28 times 60 divided by 40, and we get 42. The answer to life, happiness, in the universe, or however that quote goes. Okay, Marcy will paint the shaded ridge in one pentagonal wall of the outside of the house. We know one quart will cover 50 square feet, and one coat will be applied. So how many quarts do we need to buy? So we need to find the area. The easiest way to do this is split this into shapes. 6 times 12 is 72. Area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So in this case, it's 1/2 times 12 times 3, which is 6 times 3, which is 18. So we have 18 in the triangle, 72 in the house. Add those together, we get 90, which means we need at least 2 quarts, because it's 50. The answer between 50 and 100, we need 2 quarts, so G. Okay, question 17. Certain computer performs 1.5 times 10 to the 8 calculations per second. How many seconds? Well, it takes computer for 1 this many calculations. Okay, calculations per second, we can use that to set up an equation. That means we want the equation is going to be calculations per second. So since we know it's 6.0 times 10 to the 16th calculations per, meaning divide, seconds, which is time, and that's going to equal 1.5 times 10 to the 8th calculations per second. So to solve for time, we're going to multiply up on both sides and divide both sides by the number that they've given us. So basically, we just type that in our calculator. 6.0 times 10 to the 16th divided by parentheses 1.5 times 10 to the 8th. And we get 400 million, which is 4, and then we have 8 zeros there. And our answer is D. Okay, in the figure below, AE and BD intersect at C, and AD and DE are parallel. That's what that means, is parallel, right? Which of the following angles must have the same measure? Okay, so since they're parallel, you can do the Z rule, right? Since we're looking at BAC, that's BAC, we can just follow the same thing along and draw our Z. This is the one that has to be the same angle. So we can call it CED. Is that an option? Yes, it is. Okay. They also could have called it AED, but that was not an option anywhere. So remember, the Z rule says that if you can draw a Z or a backwards Z, I don't know which one of those is a Z, do you know? Whatever. Those two are going to be equal, and those two are going to be equal. Anytime you have parallel lines. Okay? In the standard xy coordinate plane, the point -2, -4 is the midpoint. That's the midpoint. So anytime you have a coordinates and you're doing something like this, just a quick sketch. So 2 over -4 down, there's our midpoint. And then we have 8 over and 8 down is our other endpoint. So our first endpoint is going to be this direction. So really easy, we just say, well, how far over do we go? We go from 2 to 8, so that's 6. And we go from -4 down to -8, so that's 4 down. Which means I'm going to go 6 more this way, so 2 to 0 to -4, and then 4 more up. So I'm going to end up at 0, so -4, 0. A. The product of two positive integers is 78. The greater integer is 1 more than twice the lesser integer. What is the greater integer? Okay, so we know we have, I'm going to call it the greater integer, and the lesser integer is going to be 78. I also know the greater integer is 1 more than twice the lesser integer. So if I find twice the lesser integer, the greater integer is still 1 more than that. So twice the lesser integer plus 1. Okay, so then again, it's just back to the same old thing of substitution. So we're going to end up with 2L plus 1 times L equals 78. So we distribute that out and we get 2L squared plus L minus 78 equals 0. I minus 78 over because this obviously needs to be a quadratic equation. So then we have to find our roots of 78. And they have to, lots of different ways to do this. I always just think, well, this obviously is my first term, right? And so my first term must have come from 2L plus something, and then L is another thing. One thing to watch out for here, we're going to get a negative 78, which means that one of these is positive and one of these negatives. So when I take this number and this number, now the key here is this number outside is going to be double. So I'm looking at all the different multiples of 78, doubling one of them, and then I have to find a difference of positive 1. So the first multiple of 78 is obviously 1 and 78. That's not an option, but that's okay. Then we have 2 and 39. We have 3 and 26. We have 4. Nope. We have 5, 6. We have 6 and 13. Okay, so now we're getting close. If I double one of these, so if I double the 6, then 12 and 13 do have a difference of 1. So that means since I doubled the 6 goes over here, and 13 goes here. Now, which of those is going to be negative? Since I want a positive 1, I need my positive 13, so I need my negative 12. So then my solutions, my lesser integer is either something weird over here, or it's 6, and that is the answer. Oh, nope, see, I almost fell for the trap. What is the greater integer? See, once again, you naturally, no matter how you do this, you're normally going to solve for the lesser integer, but the greater integer is, twice as big as the lesser plus 1, so there's your 13. So there's your answer, J. Okay? A set of numbers consists of all odd integers that are greater than 1 and less than 21. So that means we're looking at 3, 5, 7, 9. I'm going to come back over here for 11, 13, 15, 17, 19. To be less than 21, we're not including 21, just like we didn't include 1. What is the probability that number picked will be divisible by 3? Well, this one's divisible by 3, this one, and this one. And since we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we have 3 out of 9, which is 1/3. Noah bowled 3 games for his bowling team. In the second game, he scored 10 points more than the first game. In the third game, 10 points more than the second game. His average was 230 for the 3 games. How many points did Noah score in his 3rd game? The thing about averages is if your average you find by taking your sum divided by the number, okay, well then you can rearrange that equation and take the number times the average, and that gives you your sum. So that lets me know that his sum is 230 times 3, which is 690. So 690 is going to equal his 1st game plus his 1st game plus 10, which is his 2nd game. Now if his 3rd game is his 2nd game plus 10, that's his 1st game plus 10 plus 10, or in other words, his 1st game plus 20, which means that we have 3 plus 30. So we subtract 30 from both sides, and we get 660 equals 3F. Divide by 3, and we get 220 for his 1st game. So 1st game's 220, 2nd game 230, 4th game 240. J is the answer. A probably easier way is recognizing that anytime you have a arithmetic sequence where the numbers increase by the same amount each time, so they're increasing by 10 each time, then your average and your median are always going to be the same. Your mean and your median are always going to be the same. So we could have known from the beginning that his middle game was going to be 230 and then gone from there. Probably would have been easier to guess and check too. We know his average was 230. Well, his 3rd game was obviously more than average, so we can cross off those two, and then you can guess and check and say, well, 240 means 230 and then 220, and that does work. 250, 40, and 30, there's no way to get 230 as your average there, so there we go. Okay, 23. For 2 values of x in the equation, yada, 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 true. Okay, so again, this is an equation where you use the quadratic formula or factoring. Factoring is pretty straightforward in this. We know we're looking for factors that multiply to 6 and add to -5. Since these are positive, means that they both have to add, not subtract. So obviously our roots are going to be x minus 2 and x minus 3. Now remember that your roots are not the same thing as your factors or your values. Your roots are your factors, but they're not the same thing as your solutions and your values. So our solutions here, we have to say each of these equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0 means x equals 2. X minus 3 equals 0 means x equals 3. So our solutions are going to be positive 2 and positive 3, which is E. Observation of a certain bacterial colony has shown that the population of cells doubles every 3 hours. Given that the initial cell is 8 million, 15 hours. Okay, so this is one where you could do a fancy equation, or you could just start at time 0. So at time 0, it's 8. If it doubles every 3 hours, then we can just skip to 3 hours where he's 16, 6 hours where he's 32, 9 hours where he's 64, 12 hours where he's 128, and 15 hours where he's 256. So K is the answer there. Audrey takes biology class, Spanish class. Biology, algebra, and Spanish. 1 of 3 teachers who teach biology, 4 teachers who teach algebra, and 2 teachers who teach Spanish. What are the total possibilities? Well, she has a possibility of picking 3 biology teachers. So biology could be A, B, and C. Then she has the possibility of 4 algebra teachers. We'll call those, 4 algebra. So that's D, E, F, G, and then the 2, so H, I. Okay, so the idea then is she could choose A and D and H, or she could use A and D and I. So choosing A and D, she gets 2 choices. But she can also have the same 2 choices with A and E and H, and A and E and I. So choose A and E, or A and F, or A and G. So each of these 4 choices is going to have 2 more choices. So it would have 4 times 2. But then she could have the same thing going on with B. She should have B and D and HI, or B and F and HI. So each of these 3 choices. And this is called the fundamental counting principle, where basically if you have multiple different options and you want the total possibilities, your total possibilities are simply going to be your individual options multiplied. As long as your individual options are independent of each other, then you can just multiply those. So 3 times 4 is 12 times 2 is 24. Okay, matrices are kind of weird, but for the most part, they're actually, aside from multiplication, matrices are pretty intuitive. So if you have a 2 right here next to a box of matrices, you kind of treat this as like it were parentheses. So what would you do? You assume the 2 is going to distribute out to each of those places. So that makes it 8 and 2x and minus 2 and 6. Now if you have one matrix box, adding another matrix box, again it's kind of intuitive. You're going to have this spot, this top left spot, is going to add to this top left spot, and you have 8 plus 3 equals 11. And the funny thing is you actually don't even care. But that's there as a way to check your answers. All we really care about is solving for x. So we can simplify this to, we know our 2x plus our 1 has to equal the 9 that is sitting right here. And so 2x plus 1 equals 9. Subtract 1 from both sides. We get 2x equals 8, so x equals 4. Okay, Sophia's goal this past summer was to save an average of $5 per week for 10 weeks. So again, we take that same idea we talked about before, where if our average times our number equals our sum is oftentimes a better thing to work with. So right there we know that if she wants $5 per week for 10 weeks, she should have saved up $50. 5 times 10. She ended up saving $4 for the first 9 weeks and $12 for the 10th week. So 4 times 9 is 36, plus 12 is 48. She ended up saving $48. So really she needed to save $2 more total. Now if she had spread those $2 out over the 10 weeks, then that is 20 cents per week, or just $2 divided by 10. The rectangular deck on Sachi's house has a width of 4 and a length of 6. He remodels the deck by increasing both the length and the width by the same amount. So I'm going to go, this is going to be x, and this is going to be x. The area of our new deck is twice the area of the original deck. So what was the area of the original deck? 6 times 4 is 24. So we know her new deck has got to be 48, which means 48 has to equal 4 plus x times 6 plus x. Now again, you could do a quadratic equation here, but it's probably easier to guess and check. Let's say if she extends her deck by 2, that's 6 times 8, and 6 times 8 is 48. Extends it by 1, it'd be 5 times 7. 5 times 7 is not 48. Extends it by 3, it'd be 7 times 9. That's too big again. So again, though, they're asking what's the length of her new deck. So it's not asking what x is. X is 2. So even if you had gone through that whole process, you would have got x is 2. But they're asking what the length of the new deck is. The length is a longer side, so the new deck is going to be 8. Nestor will bury one end of the cable 3 feet from the base of the antenna and attach the other end of the cable at a point 8 feet above the ground, shown below. When taught, the length of the exposed cable will be that. Which of the following expressions represents the measure of the angle taught cable with level ground? Okay, so you have options here. Actually, you don't. Every option they choose for you is tangent. I mean, you could have done a few. You could have done SOHCAHTOA. You could have done the sine of the angle is going to be 8 over root 73. But none of that matters because they know we're choosing sine. Tangent. So we know we're going to have the opposite over the adjacent. So the tangent of the angle equals 8 over 3. So the way to solve for the angle in this equation is take the inverse tangent, and basically those cancel out. So your angle equals the inverse tangent of 8/3, which is C. Okay, we have a circle, and it has yada, yada, yada. Which of the following is the equation of the circle? So remember, with the equation of the circle, the generic is x minus the x center coordinate plus y minus the y center coordinate equals the radius squared. Oh, I skipped the squareds. Sorry. Everything is squared. Okay? And so really you're just saying, what are we choosing between? We're choosing between plus and minus 8.5, plus and minus 7.5, and then we're choosing between 25 and 10. Well, since we know it's r squared and since our radius is 5, we know we're not dealing with f and g. We know we're subtracting both coordinates, but the x-coordinate is negative to begin with. So if we subtract the x-coordinate, then we're going to end up adding 8.5, so it's not h. Subtracting our y-coordinate, though, we are going to subtract 7.5, so the answer is J. What's the area in square units of the circle? Well, area is pi r squared, so that's pi times 5 squared, so that's 25 pi, so D. The circle will be reflected across the y-axis. Where's the y-axis? That's right here. That means it comes over here. So it's still going to be the same height, so my y-coordinate's not going to change, but my x-coordinate is going to become positive 8.5, so my answer is K. In a plane, the distinct lines A and B and C and D intersect at A, so that means our equation looks something like this is A, B, and this is C, D, because they intersect at A, where A is between C and D. Yep. The measure of BAC is 54. Measure of, BAC is 54. So I drew it wrong, but it really doesn't matter because I want to know this angle. Well, what's the one thing I know? I know these two angles together add up to 180. So that means 54 plus x equals 180, which means to solve for x, I'm going to subtract 54 from both sides. So it's 180 minus 54. For an angle with a measure of alpha in the right triangle, sine alpha equals this and tangent alpha equals this. What's the value of cosine alpha? Okay, so if I'm going to draw that right triangle, I'm just going to pick the alpha as that one. So if sine of alpha, remember sine's opposite over hypotenuse, which means this is my 180 and this is my 181. Tangent alpha is opposite over adjacent. So this is my 180 and this is my 19. Because these both ended up being 180, I don't have to do anything. If this had been another fraction where this wasn't 180, I'd have to rearrange the fractions so that this number and this number matched up, since those are the two things that are common to sine and tangent. But I don't. So I know that my cosine is my adjacent over hypotenuse, so it's 19 over 181. For which of the following equations below is the solution an integer? Okay, pretty straightforward. I subtract 5 from both sides. I get 3n equals 19. 19 is not divisible by 3, so no on 1. Okay. Okay, same thing over here. I subtract 3 from both sides, get 5n equals 20. 20 is divisible by 5, so 2 does work. So then the question, is it 2 only or 2 and 3? So then I divide by 5 first, since it's order of operations, parentheses first. So algebra is the opposite, so parentheses last. Divide by 5, and I get n plus 3 equals 5. Well, that's pretty easy to just subtract 3 from both sides and get an integer. So it's e, 1 and 2 and 3. Whenever x and y are non-zero, what is this? Well, they're basically just saying simplify this. So the first thing I do is my numbers. I have 8 and 6 and 16. So I can just type that in my calculator. 8 times 6 times 16. And I get 768. Oh, 8 times 6 divided by 16. So I get 3. So I know my integer. I didn't have to do that. It's all the same. Okay, I know my integer is 3. So the next question is what my x is. I have 5 and 13 on top. Total of 18 on top and 6 on bottom. But remember, with exponents, you don't actually divide x to the 18, x to the 6. you're going to cancel out. And so 6 on the bottom cancels 6 on the top, so you're left with x at 12 on top. So that probably is j. Let's double check with our y's. We have 4 and 3, so we have 7 total on top. We have 14 on bottom. So when those cancel, we're left with 7 on bottom. So yes, the answer is j. Consider all products xy such that x is divisible by 8 and y is divisible by 14, which of the following is not a factor of each product xy. So then what do we know about x? We know x is going to equal to 8 times some random number a. We know that y is going to equal to 14 times some random number b. A and b don't necessarily have to be the same, right? You can have all the products of 14, yada, yada, yada. But if I put x and y together, then I'm for sure going to get 8a times 14b, which in other words is 112ab. So then the thing is, a and b could be 1 or 2 or 3 or different things. Again, 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 or whatever. But the point is, no matter what happens, 2 is going to go into 112ab. It doesn't matter what a and b are because 2 can go into 112. The same is true of 8, but not 12, which means 12 is the answer. 56 can go in, 112 can obviously go in. Another way of thinking about this is really easy. X is divisible by 8, so x could be something as simple as 8. It could be 16, it could be 24 or 32, but it could just be 8. Y is divisible by 14. Again, it could be 14, 28, whatever. But the point is, xy could be as simple as 112. The only way C is going to work is if either A or B has a 3 as a factor, so some multiple of 3. Shown in the standard xy coordinate plane below, we have coordinates A, B, C, 4C, and what's A? Well, since we know this is an equilateral triangle, that means this distance and this distance are the same. But what really matters is this and this are the same, which means if I go straight down, then this distance here and this distance here are the same. It's the midpoint, right? Which means that my distance to coordinate A is going to be halfway from here to here. Since this is 0 and 4C, halfway between those two is 2C. On Monday, Jan and Diego opened separate bank accounts and deposited 28 and 161 respectively. Okay, a lot of people forget that respectively means the one I mentioned first and the other thing I mentioned first go together, mention second and second go together, and third and so forth. Which means Jan is the 28 and Diego is the 161. Every Monday, Jan adds 1825 and Diego withdraws 15, which of the following gives the equation? Well, pretty straightforward. For Jan, she's going to start with 28 and add 1825. But she's only going to add 28 once and add 1825 every week. So it's pretty clear that it's going to be, she's not adding a negative 1825, and it's not 28 every week and then 1825 once. So those are out. With Diego, it's the same thing. He's starting with 161 and taking away 15 every time, which means that we're going to have a positive 161 to begin with, but since he's taking away 15 every time, we have to have a negative 15 to continue, which means the answer is D. Let P and Q be real, such that P plus Q equals 4, and negative PQ equals 12, and P is bigger than Q. What's Q? Well, basically, we have to figure out what is going to add to 4, but also the negative version of it multiplies 12. So we can write this second one, probably easier to think about, is P times Q equals negative 12. So we need to add to 4 and multiply to negative 12. Well, if we're multiplying to negative 12, one of our answers has to be positive and has to be negative. So that means that we have to be dealing with a number above 0 and a number below 0, and that those still are going to add to 4. So some common things that add to 4 are obviously negative 1 and 5, but those two don't multiply to give us 12. Negative 2 and 6, those things do multiply to give us negative 12. Now you also could have negative 6 and 2. Hold on, what am I thinking? Oh, silly. Negative 6 plus 2 doesn't equal... It equals negative 4. Okay. Because negative 3 and 7 would not multiply 12. So there's our answer. Since P is bigger than Q, P has to be our 6. Okay. Table 1 below gives the weights rounded to nearest pound at birth for 1 and 5 years. Models these weights after a linear function. Which is best? Okay, so we can just start with A, 3x. 3 times 6 gives us 18, so according to A, that's off by 1. 3 times 5 gives us 15, that's off by 1. 3 times 8 gives us 24, that's right on. 3 times 10 gives us 30, that's right on. 9 times 3 gives us 27, that's off by 1. So A is off by 1, 1, and 1, and 0, and 0. 4x is 24, that's off by a bunch. 5 times 4 is off by a bunch. 8 times, there's no way it's 4x. X plus 6, x plus 11. 6 plus 11 does equal exactly 17. And 5 plus 11 does equal exactly 16. 8 plus 11 is 19, so that's off by 5. And 10 plus 11 is 21, that's off by a lot, so it's not going to be that. X plus 16 is too big for these ones, so 2x plus 10, 2 times 6 is 12 plus 10. No, so the answer is A. The fact that it was 1 off by 1, 1, and 0 makes it pretty good. In the standard xy coordinate plane, what is the slope of the line that's perpendicular to the line this? Best way to find slope is to get things into the slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form means I'm going to subtract my 8x over, so I get 7y equals 112 minus 8x. And then divide everything by 7. I'm going to rewrite this as y equals negative 8/7 x plus 112 over 7. Now the thing about this is since we care about the line perpendicular and the slope, we don't actually care about that. Now the slope of this line is negative 8/7, but perpendicular we have to flip it and change the sign. So we're looking for positive 7/8, so J. Circle below has a diameter of 8 centimeters. Which of the following is closest area to the square centimeters, or the in square centimeters to the square? Since we know the circle has a diameter of 8 centimeters, then we know this distance is 8 centimeters. Since this is a square, we know that we can x plus x has to equal, Pythagorean theorem. X squared plus x squared has to equal 8 squared. So 2x squared has to equal 64. So x squared has to equal 32. So then x is the square root of 32. Remember, we actually want the area of the square, and we find the area of the square by x times x. So again, we're brought to x squared, which is 32 square root 32, which is this 32. And we actually knew that already, right there in that line. So the answer is B. Points, this and this, below, collection of points. Point is one from the circle. Okay, so the idea is we want to know where the center of the circle is. They've given us this curve right here. From that, you can pretty well just kind of say, well, the center is somewhere in this area-ish. If you want, we can actually test out a few points. We know the definition of the circle is they're twice as far from B as from 0. So, for example, is it this point? Or let's try this point. This point is 2 away from B, but only 1 away from 0. So it is, in fact, twice as far. So this point for sure is on the circle. So we can actually take that curve and finish it off there. If this distance is twice as far as this distance, then this distance is also twice as far as this distance. So the negative root 3 is also on the circle. So again, we're getting a little bit better. Now, in order to find the middle, we're going to have to see this point somewhere down here. Would it be 2? It's 2 away, but it's 5 away, so that's not twice as far. So about 3. It's 3 away, and it's 6 away. So negative 3 is right on the circle. Well, if this is right on the circle at negative 3, and positive 1's right on the circle, then our midpoint has to be between those two, and so our midpoint has to be negative 1. So our center of our circle for sure is going to be J. Okay? Given that this is this and this is this, what's the value of y? Okay, I'm going to solve for x in this equation and get 3 times x on both sides equals 12x, divided by 12 on both sides. So x equals 3/12. So now I get 3/12 over y equals 2. Again, times by y, divide both sides by 2. So what's half of 3/12? That's 3/24. Oh, I see. I was looking for 3/24. It's not there, but 3/24 can be simplified to divide by 3, 1/8. Temperatures, at some point, one value for x is where x degrees Fahrenheit equals x degrees Celsius, which means there's going to be some point where your F and your C are the same thing. Well, if they're ever the same thing, they only need to be one variable. So I can rewrite this equation as x equals 9/5 x plus 32. Okay? So then I'm just solving for x. I'm going to subtract x from both sides and subtract 32 from both sides. So I get negative 32 equals 9/5 minus 5/5 is 4/5 x times both sides by 5/4, and I get negative 40. G is my answer. Okay. The domain of this is a set of all real numbers except. So remember, domains are any value that you can plug in for x, which is usually anything. There's usually no reason that you can't plug something in for x except for 2 exceptions. The obvious exception is when you hit the square root of a negative number. That can't happen in real life. Nothing times itself will ever equal a negative 16. The other option is you can't divide by 0. You know, as Siri will tell you, if you try to divide by 0, Cookie Monster gets sad because you have no cookies and you have no friends, and it's a bad deal. So, what would cause us to divide by 0? Well, the obvious ones are 0. Because if I plug 0 in for x, those are going to go away. So then, if I factor that out front, an x out front, then I'm left with x squared minus 9. If you remember your common factorables or whatever, great. If not, you can look at these options and say, well, I know 0 is an option for sure, so it's not going to be those. The question is between 0 and 3, or negative 3, 0, and 3, does negative 3 cause you to divide undefined? So you plug negative 3 in there, and you get negative 27 minus 9 times negative 3. 9 times negative 3 is negative 27, so you're minusing negative 27, so it's going to be negative 27 plus 27. You are dividing by 0 in that case, and that is your answer. But if you had remembered, x minus 3 is a factor of x squared minus 9 and x plus 3. If you ever have a square minus a square, it's a minus b and a plus b. Okay, figure below, we want to know what is the perimeter of the figure. Okay, so we definitely have an 8 here and a 6 here, another 8 here, and some distance here. So we're for sure going to have 8 plus 8, which is 16, plus 6, which is 24. No, 16 plus 6 is 22. So it probably is going to be G. But let's just double check. How would I find the area of this piece? Well, it's half a circle. So if I just make it a circle, I can find the area. Remember, not area, perimeter. The perimeter of a circle is called the circumference. Circumference is 2 pi r. r in this case is 3, so 2r is 6. So our circumference total is 6 pi. But remember, we only care about the distance from A to B, not the full circumference. So it's going to be half that, so we are going to add 3 pi. 8 plus 8 is 16. 16 plus 6 is not 20. It is 22. G. What is the area of a parallelogram shown below? The area of a parallelogram is always just base times height. Because remember, you can cut off this triangle and stick it over here, and now you've got a rectangle where the rectangle has a base of 10 and a height of 5. Doesn't matter what your hypotenuse length or whatever you want to call it is, your side length of your parallelogram. The area is going to be base times height, 50. B. What is the sixth term in the geometric sequence whose second term is 4 and whose fifth term is 32? Okay, so geometric sequence means we're a timesing sequence. You do need to know that because an arithmetic sequence could have worked as well. But we know it's the sixth term. So our second term is negative 4, 3, 4, 5 is positive 32, 6 is the question. So then the question is, what are we going to multiply to get from here to here, and the same thing from here to here, and then from here to here? You can, I don't know, sit and think about this. You could do some complex math again. It's pretty straightforward to guess and check, though. Let's say we multiply by 3. 4 times 3 is 12 times 3 is 36 times, we're already too big, so it can't be 3. So let's try 2. 4 times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. Okay. But the thing is, it wasn't 4, it's negative 4. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, negative 16, and negative 32. So it can't be that. What about negative 2? Negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. Positive 8 times negative 2 is negative 16. Negative 16 times negative 2 is positive 32. So that is our term. It is negative 2 we're timesing by, which means one more negative 2 puts us at negative 64. If you want to be fancy and do that, we know we're timesing by some unknown number, x. So we say 4 times x times x, negative 4 times x times x times x has to equal 32. Divide both sides by negative 4. And we get x cubed has to equal negative 8. Take the cube root of both sides, and you could have found that x is negative 2 that way, and then times 32 by negative 2 to give you negative 64. Only if you really want to go the extra miles. What are the values of theta between 0 and 2 pi when tangent of theta equals negative 1? So remember, the tangent is opposite over adjacent. When will you ever have a fraction that equals negative 1? Well, the top and the bottom have to be the same, but opposite sides. You couldn't have they have to be, 1 and 1, or 2 and 2, or 3 and 3, or 4 and 4. But really, 1 and negative 1, or negative 1 and 1, 2 and negative 2, or negative 2 and 2. So the point is they have to be the same absolute value number, whatever that's called. Magnitude. Okay, so then the idea then is we know our triangle in the xy coordinate, or in the unit circle, since we're between 0 and 2 pi, 0's here, 2 pi's all the way back around. So we haven't limited ourselves at all. We have the entire unit circle to deal with. But when are the opposite and adjacent ever going to be equal? They're going to be equal at exactly 45 degrees. So, and these, where this and this are the same. But again, we don't only need them to be equal magnitude, we need them to be opposite sign as well. So that doesn't work in the first quadrant because they're both positive. And it doesn't work in the third quadrant because they're both negative. So the second quadrant works great because positive and negative, and the fourth quadrant as well. So if you again remember your spots, you know that this is going to be half pi. So this is going to be a fourth pi. So this is going to be 3/4 pi, 4/4, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4 pi. So we're dealing with 3/4 and 7/4, which is C. Okay? Can a soda pop is the shape of a right cylinder with diameter of, or height of 6, diameter of 2. when you pour the soda pop into a cup that has a 3 inches diameter, how much high volume of cylinder? So we know the volume of cylinder of the soda can is going to be pi times r, which diameter is 2, so radius is 1 squared times height. So our soda can has 6 pi total soda in it. So how much is 6 pi going to fill up the glass? Well, we know the glass is pi times 1.5 squared. We don't know the h, but we know that total volume is going to still add up to 6 pi. So we divide by pi's and they cancel out. 1.5 squared is, I want to say 2.25. Oops. Yep. So then we take our 6 divided by 2.25 and we get 2.6666, which if you recognize that, that is 2 2/3. F is the answer. Suppose equally spaced dots are marked on each side of a rectangular regular polygon with a dot each vertex, and the distance between the consecutive dots is the same for all sides. Figure below shows 4 spaced dots, including a dot each vertex for an equilateral triangle. Which of the following expressions represents the number of dots regular polygon with n equally spaced dots, including one at each vertex, marked at each side? So what is n? N spaced dots, including one on each vertex, marked on each of its s sides. So we have n dots on each side. So how many dots do we have on this side? In this case, n equals 4. And how many sides do we have? That's obvious, 3. So how many dots total do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 total dots. So n times s in this situation would not give me 9. N times s minus 1 would not give me 9. N times s minus s would give me 9. Plus s would not, and minus n would not. So the answer is C. Which makes sense. The point is, if we have these dots, if we just say I have 4 and 4 and 4, then we're going to count each of our corners twice. So we have to take away 1 per corner, which is the same as 1 per side. So that's why we're subtracting away s. Okay, a storage facility currently offering special rate. Customers, blah, blah, blah. 6 months, $1 free. First month, customers pay all units. Okay, sign a contract, size 3 units for 12 months. The Daria will pay 12 months at the current special rate. What percent of the regular rental rate for 12 months? Okay, so again, first month is $1, which means she's going to do $1 plus $100. But she does $100 for 11 months, so plus 1,100, which means she's going to pay a total of 1,101, but she should have paid a total of 1,200, which 1,101 divided by 1,200 means she's only paying 91.75% of what she should. So how much is she saving? See, 91.7 people are tempted to pick K or whatever. But she's saving 1 minus that number. So she's saving 8.25%. F. Size 5 units can be subdivided to form others. What's the greatest number of size 1 that forms size 5? Well, size 5 are 8 by 16. And size 1 are 2 by 4. A lot of people are tempted to say, well, that's 4 times as big and 4 times as big, so it's 4. But remember, it's 4 times as wide and 4 times as long, which means we can fit 4 apartments this way, but we can also fit 4 apartments this way. So we total get 16 apartments. Another way of doing that is say 8 times 16 is 128. 2 times 4 is 8. How much bigger is that? It's 16 times bigger. Or, there's lots of ways to do this one. But the point is we can actually get 16. 56 is tricky. First thing to figure out is what is x? Now they say size x, but also earlier they say size 5, size 1, size 5, right? So then what is the x replacing? X is replacing this number in the column right here. So for example, a size 1 storage unit has a dimension of 8. A size 2 storage unit has dimensions of 16, size 3, whatever. So the point is, which of these are going to give us the area using x for the equation? So we can start with size 1. We know size 1 is 8. So does 2 to the third plus or times 1 equal 8? Yes. 2 to the 3 times 1 equals 8. 2 to the 2 plus 1, which is 2 to the third, equals 8. 2 times 1 plus 1, so 2 squared times 2. Yes. 1 plus 2 is 3 squared equals 9. So k is the only one that doesn't work there. Size 2, we know it should equal 16. 2 to the third times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16. 2 to the 3 times 2 is 2 to the 6th. Now 2 to the 6th does not equal 16. 2 to the 2 plus 2 is 2 to the 4th. That does equal 16. 2 times 2 plus 1, or in other words 3 squared. 2 times 3 squared does not equal 16. Okay, let's try size 3. 4 times 8 should equal 32. 2 to the third times 3. 8 times 3 does not equal 32. 2 to the 2 plus 3, or 2 to the 5th. 2 to the 5th does equal 32, so H is A. Another thing you could have done is recognize that every time we go up, we're going up by a factor of 2. So whatever we're looking for, our equation has to increase. Every time you increase x, you're increasing 1 extra 2, which is why H is the only one that works. It's the only one that's multiplying 1 extra 2 for every 1 increase of x. Okay, last but not least page. For how many integers x is the equation this true? Anytime you have exponents where you're solving, technically you would need logs, but an easier way is to recognize what do these guys have in common. This one's 3 to a power, and this one's 9 to a power. But since I know 9 and 3 are closely related, specifically that 9 is the same thing as 3 squared, I could rewrite this as equals 3 squared to the power of x minus 2. And then this is obviously 3 to the x plus 1. Well, 3 squared to the x minus 2, remember, when you have exponents raised to exponents, those exponents multiply. So we get 3 to the 2x minus 4, which lets us know that x plus 1 has to equal 2x minus 4. Because if 3 to this power equals 3 to that power, then those powers have to mean the same thing. Which means I can subtract x from both sides, I can add 4 to both sides, and I get x equals 5. Wait, 5 is an answer choice. We found no. Okay, remember, they're asking how many integers. The fact that we got an x equals something lets us know that we only have one integer that's going to work. Some things to watch out for there, though. If we had gotten x squared equals something and then square rooted it, technically if x squared equals something, that means we have 2 solutions. If we get an x third equals something, that means we have 3 solutions, and so forth. The way we get an infinite number of solutions is if we end up with something like x equals x, or some number equals the same number. So 5 equals 5, 2 equals 2. Basically, so you know an infinite number of solutions could have worked. 0 solutions would have to be something that never works. So for example, x equals x plus 1. That will never work. In the standard xy coordinate plane, B, positive axis measure AOB is 50, length AO is 1. What are the coordinates of A? Well, since this is 150 degrees, that lets me know that this is 30 degrees, and since we know that this is 1, we could do SOHCAHTOA to find our coordinates. So for example, the sine of 30 equals our y value over 1, and the cosine of 30 equals our x value over 1. That's pretty straightforward. The problem with that is you're going to get some weird things. The other thing you could do is recognize that this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. For the 30, 60, 90 triangle, well, okay, let me go back. The weird things meaning decimals in your calculator. Your calculator is never going to give you out fractions with square roots in it, or fractions at all. So you could do it that way, find the answers, work out, well, root 2 over 2 means the same as this, plug that into your calculator, see what decimal that equals, see which decimals from your calculator match up with decimals over here. The other wrinkle to that is because we've moved into the second coordinate, although we are moving up, we're also moving left. So our x value has to be negative, which means j and k cannot be options. But also, our y value for sure is positive. So again, k and j can't be options. So then the question is, using the 36 and 90 triangle, how do we figure this out? Well, remember, 36 and 90 comes from an equilateral triangle, which means instead of the 90-degree angle in the middle, we would go out a little bit further, where this is 60 and 60, and this whole thing is 60, which means if this is 1, then this is 1, then this is 1. Well, if this whole thing is 1, then from the origin, or from the line up is a half. So if this is 1, then this is a half. So we know our y-coordinate is going to be a half. So we know F's our answer. But if you're not sure about that, then you can also do Pythagorean theorem from there, or memorize the right triangle and know that this is this times root 3. Or in other words, 1/2 times root 3, which is the same thing as root 3 over 2. And again, we're moving left, so it's negative. Which of the following polar coordinates represents the same location as this? Well, people freak out about polar coordinates, but the point is the 3 and the 3 are guaranteed the same. So what they're asking is blah, 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 same as 45 degrees. Which of these are the same as 45 degrees? Negative 45 and positive 45 are not the same. 45 is right here, negative 45 is right here. No. Okay? Then we can just go through these and figure out, well, where would negative 130 or 315 be? I'm starting here, going all the way around to 315 would end me at the same position as going up to 45 ends me. Going positive to 315, that's not the same. Positive 135 is not the same. Negative 225 is not the same. These two are the same, and these two are the same, and those two are the same. So A is our answer. Okay, we've got 2 vertical asymptotes and 1 horizontal asymptote. Thing to remember here is vertical asymptotes, again, come when you're dividing by 0. You can't divide by 0, so that breaks the math. But if you almost divide by 0, then you're dividing by a really, really, really small number. When you divide by a really small number, it's the same thing as multiplying by a really large number. So you end up with shooting up or down towards infinity. But a horizontal asymptote is different. A horizontal asymptote means we ignore the middle of the equation and we just worry what happens to the equation as we shoot out horizontally. Which means the x values we're going to be plugging in are going to be really big x values, like x equals 1,000, or x equals 1,000,000, or x equals 1,000,000,000, or 1,000,000,000,000. So if we look at these equations and we plug in x equals 1,000,000, then subtracting 18 from 2 times 1,000,000 squared, who cares about the 18, right? 1,000,000 squared is not 6 zeros, but 12 zeros. So if you have 2 and then 12 zeros, and then you subtract 18 away, it's not significant. Same thing is true down here. Even subtracting 5 million away from a trillion, 5 million is still a drop in the bucket. Bill Gates has 1 trillion pennies, or maybe more. I don't know how much he's worth. But if you ask him to, 5 million pennies, he doesn't really worry about that much. It's not significant to him. So what that means is horizontal asymptotes, because we're dealing with really big numbers, we can ignore anything but the biggest term in the equation. And as we look at this and simplify it down, we recognize that our trillion on top and our trillion on bottom cancel out. So if you go all the way out to x equals 1 trillion, you end up with just y equals 2. Same thing negatively, y equals 2. And if you go to 1 billion and 1 trillion to begin with, then you're looking at even bigger numbers where this 18 and this 5x become even more insignificant, and you really end up with just 2x squared over x squared, which is just y equals 2. Another thing that would be really easy, since it's horizontal asymptote, we know we're not dealing with 0 and 3 and 9 because those are all x equals. So then you have a 50-50 chance at least of getting what the horizontal asymptote is. But hopefully you can remember that horizontal asymptotes deal with moving horizontally far away, heading out towards infinity, and so we get up there. So this has been test 1573G. Any questions, comment below. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.